The day that repeats. Nathan Graham jolted awake, his heart pounding in his chest. The sunlight filtered through the blinds, painting familiar patterns on the ceiling. Everything looked normal, but a strange unease prickled at the back of his mind. He grabbed his phone from the nightstand. Monday, December 7th. Shaking off the weird feeling, he swung his legs out of bed and shuffled to the shower. His morning routine carried him through the motions. Shower, coffee, tie. By the time he got in the car and turned on the radio, the feeling had faded into the background. The news anchor's voice filled the car, reporting on a protest happening downtown and a gas leak near a popular cafe. Nathan barely listened, his mind already on the day ahead. By lunchtime, he was at his favorite cafe, a steaming cup of coffee in hand. It was his usual midday retreat from the chaos of work. He was scrolling through his phone when the world exploded around him. The blast sent him flying backward, his ears ringing as glass and debris rained down. The last thing he saw before everything went dark was the swirling smoke consuming the cafe. Nathan woke up gasping, his heart hammering in his chest. The sunlight painted the same familiar patterns on the ceiling. He sat up quickly, his breath catching as he grabbed his phone. Monday, December 7th. No, he whispered, his hands trembling. It had to be a dream. Shaking his head, he got out of bed and tried to go about his day, but everything felt eerily familiar. The smell of the coffee, the words on the radio, the exact phrasing of the news anchor's report. At lunch, he found himself sitting in the same cafe again, gripping his cup tightly. His mind screamed for him to leave, but he stayed, waiting to see if the explosion would happen again. And it did. The third time Nathan woke up on December 7th. He wasn't confused. He was terrified. He got out of bed with a sense of dread weighing on him. The day unfolded exactly as before, every moment predictable. This time, he decided to test it. At lunch, he left the cafe early and stood on the opposite side of the street. At 12:03 p.m., the cafe exploded just as it had before, the blast rippling outward and shattering the surrounding windows. Nathan realized he wasn't imagining things. He was trapped, living the same day over and over again. Each time the day repeated, Nathan learned something new. He noticed details he'd missed before, like the man in a gray suit passing a briefcase to someone else near the cafe at 11:45 a.m., or the unmarked van idling just a block away. He started keeping notes, writing down times, faces, and actions. The briefcase always changed hands before the explosion. The van disappeared right after, and no matter what he tried, the cafe always exploded at 12:03 p.m.
He tried to intervene. He warned the staff, called the police, even tried to stop the briefcase exchange himself. But nothing worked. No matter what he did, the day reset as soon as the cafe exploded. On one loop, desperate for answers, he stayed in the cafe to watch more closely. That's when he noticed her. She was sitting in the corner booth, her face partially hidden by the brim of a hat. She wasn't there in the earlier loops, and she didn't act like the other patrons. Her eyes darted around nervously, and she seemed to be watching everything just like he was. When the explosion went off, Nathan's last thought was of her. The next morning, he woke up determined. This time, he didn't go to work. Instead, he went straight to the cafe and waited. She arrived at 11:30, sitting in the same corner booth. He approached her, his heart racing. "You know what's going on, don't you?" Her eyes widened, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she motioned for him to sit. "How long have you been stuck?" she asked softly. 13 days, Nathan said. "You, far longer," she replied. "But if you're noticing me now, it means we're getting closer to the truth." "The truth about what?" Nathan demanded. She hesitated, then leaned in. "This isn't just a time loop. It's a test. And if we fail, the day resets. If we succeed," she trailed off, her eyes flicking toward the briefcase exchange happening outside. Nathan followed her gaze. "What's in the briefcase?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "The key to breaking the loop. But it's not just about stopping the explosion. It's about why it's happening in the first place." Together, they spent loop after loop piecing the puzzle together. They followed the briefcase, tracked the van, and uncovered a conspiracy tied to a powerful corporation. The explosion wasn't an accident, it was a deliberate act meant to cover up the transfer of classified information. As the loops continued, Nathan realized the test wasn't just about solving the mystery. It was about sacrifice. In the final loop, they managed to intercept the briefcase. But the only way to stop the explosion was for one of them to stay behind and deactivate the device inside it. Nathan looked at her, his heart heavy. You've been here longer. You deserve to get out? She shook her head. No. This is your fight now. Before he could argue, she smiled softly and pushed him out of the cafe just as the timer hit 0. The explosion never came. Nathan woke up the next day to a new date, December 8th. The loop was broken, but he couldn't shake the memory of her sacrifice. As he walked down the street, he swore he saw her reflection in a passing window, a faint smile on her lips. The day had ended, but the mystery of who she was and why she had been trapped for so long would haunt him forever.